Hong Kong and Singapore have emerged as the top of the 2019 Index of Economic Freedom. Countries around the world were ranked based on 12 measures of economic freedom, such as rule of law, government size, and openness of markets. People in economies that were rated free or mostly free have more than double the average income and are more than 6 times more well off than those in, quote, repressed economies. The 2019 global average economic freedom score saw a slip from last year's score, but it was still the third highest in the index's 25-year history. Let's bring in Edwin Feulner, who is the founder and former president of the Heritage Foundation. He joins us live from Hong Kong, and Michael Spencer, our guest host, still with us here at the desk. Welcome to you.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be back.
Yeah, great to have you on. So we kind of ran through the checklist of what you looked at in terms of the economic freedom, but I want to hear it from you directly. How do you define economic freedom in a country?
Economic freedom means the opportunity for entrepreneurs to be industrious, to create their own new ideas, to be able to be secure under rule of law, to know that government is predictable in terms of what regulations might be forthcoming, and that the environment is such that they can expand, they can reinvest capital, they can hire people without, again, intensive government intervention. And all of those factors come together, and it's not just for the big boys, it's not just for government. As you pointed out, more economic freedom means rising standard of living for everybody in a society.
So you've got Hong Kong at the top of the list. Certainly from a business standpoint, people can look at it and say, look, it makes sense in terms of the economic freedom. And yet people are going to look at this ranking and say, well, how do the politics weigh into all of this? Because it is becoming more, we are seeing more and more of a Chinese hand here.
Yes. Rule of law, I guess, would be the main factor there in terms of Hong Kong maintaining its independence, maintaining its independent rating. I mean, here is one country, two systems, Hong Kong #1, China 100. Now, I must say, in China's defense, it's gone from 123 a year ago to 100. So they're actually doing better. But boy, they've got a long way to go in terms of rule of law, intellectual property, all the kinds of things that we hear about every day.
But over time, do you see the risk that the growing Chinese influence on Hong Kong starts to erode that economic freedom? I mean, this has always been the story in China, that you fundamentally can't be economically free if you're not politically free.
That's, of course, what Margaret Thatcher said a long time ago, the two sides of the same coin, economic freedom, political freedom. Absolutely right. And it's something that we worry about. But at the same time, to Hong Kong's very great credit, this year, it is the only country in the world that scored above 90 in our index, 100 being perfect, and it's 90.2. Singapore's catching up, but it's still, Hong Kong's still clearly #1 for 25 years in a row, which is quite a remarkable achievement.
How does the economy and the growth prospects equal, or how does economic freedom unlock that kind of value? If we're saying that you know, these are thriving economies, let's say, how does your ranking sort of factor that in terms of how those qualifiers can unlock the potential of an economy?
Well, of course, we look at the specific environment at a given time. Hong Kong being as open an economy as it is, so totally dependent on trade flows, on everything that happens externally, it probably doesn't have as much control over those things as another country, a larger one, say in Australia, which is #5 in our index this year. But nonetheless, Hong Kong manages to adjust. It manages to maintain its set of principles that enable people here to really be the entrepreneurial spirit of the whole world.
What about some of the Western countries? I think a lot of people are curious about that, whether a country like Germany or even the U.S., where have they moved up in the rankings? Where do they stand right now?
United States went from, I think it was 17 or 18 last year. It's down up to #11 this year. It's doing very well because of deregulation and because of the tax cut, of course, which unleashed so much and has got such a higher growth rate of the economy, lowest unemployment. All these factors help the average person, not just the guys at the top.
How important in the construction of your index is sort of the actual competition in markets to determining overall economic freedom? In Hong Kong in particular is because it's such a small place, it's a very oligopolistic system where you've got really two providers of sort of grocery store chains and pharmacy chains and a limited number of companies providing most of the housing. So it doesn't feel like a very genuinely competitive market.
Perhaps not, but in fact, the opportunity for the little guy to get ahead, to strike out on his or her own and do much better is still very much there in Hong Kong. We'll talk about scale and things like that. But again, you look at, I remember 10 years ago when people would say, well, you've only got Watson's to look at for a pharmacy and et cetera, et cetera. Well, now we got Alibaba, you got Amazon Prime. And the market, the economy changes. And for that, we congratulate Hong Kong again for being so robustly in favor of those changes.
Okay, it's great to have you on today. Appreciate your time. Edwin Feulner from the Heritage Foundation.
Here we are.
There you
for
go,
your
the
library.
Economic Freedom Index right here. Thank you very much for that. All right, moving